Hello people and welcome to the People Building Podcast. Today we are going to be talking about the use of humour and when it may or may not be appropriate for you to use it as a way to interrupt somebody's emotional state and take them on a very different track indeed. The reason why I'm going to be sharing this particular subject area with you today is, I guess, two reasons. Number one is that I have recently completed an NLP practitioner training and have sent some wonderful new people off into the world as qualified practitioners, and actually the question around humour in sessions came up there, and we didn't really get to explore it in the level of detail that I might have liked to have done, so I'm going to share that conversation with you guys instead. The second reason why I want to explore the use of humour with you today is so that we can just look at lightening life up a little bit. I don't know about for you guys, but wow, like things are heavy out there at the moment. Life is tricky for many people, and I just think if we can have a bit more of a smile on our face and a spring in our step, and to just bring a little bit of funny into some of the day-to-day situations that we're encountering, then that can't be a bad thing, right? So if you would like to know more about when, how, and why to bring humour into your life a little bit more, then just keep on watching. My behaviour and communications on this podcast are not an accurate reflection of how I interact in my other businesses. Basically, I don't ever swear at children. If this podcast causes you distress of any kind, either by what I say or who I am, then do yourself a favour and go away. Okay, so before we dive into our subject area of good humour for today, I would just like to remind you that if you are not already subscribed to the People Building Podcast, then you can go ahead and do so. If you are listening, then you can do this by subscribing via the podcasting platform through which I am streaming into your ears right now. But if indeed you are a watcher and a listener, and you are perhaps engaged with me via our YouTube channel, then make sure you subscribe to the channel so that you get notified the next time I upload a video. You can do that by clicking the red subscribe button, and you could go ahead and like the video now. Like, you could give it a thumbs up really before I've even got started, in anticipation of the good content. And by the way, can I get a like for the purple backdrop, please? It's almost PB purple. I don't know where the remote control is. Hang on, I want to show you something. Look at that. See, you only know what's going on right now if you are watching on YouTube. If you are just listening via a podcasting platform, you got no idea what I just did. Ready? I'm going to do it again. Look at that. Hang on, I don't want to stay pink. Let's go back to blue. There we go. That's kind of PB blue, right? I've been working very hard to get this recording space just a bit nicer, not just the old sound quality over here, but also for those of you who do watch on YouTube, I hope you can appreciate the visual. Let's move on, shall we, and talk about our subject area of today. And today we are going to be focused on when, how, and why you should be funny.
Witty, go ahead, be funny.
One of the things that I will say, because, you know, there's a few of you watching for a few different reasons. Some of you are practitioners of some kind, therapists of some kind, and maybe you might be a little shy of bringing humour into your sessions. Some of you may be leaders and managers and maybe a little anxious about using humour amongst your colleagues. So depending on the context you are in is potentially going to dictate when and if humour is going to be appropriate for that particular environment. For example, as a therapist, you might think that actually humour is not something that should be brought into your sessions, but I would politely disagree with you. I think that when we are dealing with people's problems, particularly really long-standing issues that have a lot of emotional charge behind them, we can really use humour to create a better perspective on that problem and to shrink it. We can really use it to sort of distort the problem in a helpful way so that they don't see it as being as big and scary as it was. Actually, maybe it can now look more silly and funny. I was speaking to a client actually just this morning and mentioned this to him and said, you know, he'd been through lots of other therapists before coming to see me. And I said to him, don't think that just because we're doing this, that it needs to be painful. Like, you've done enough of that to yourself already. Why would you put yourself through more pain unnecessarily? If we can solve your problem whilst having as much fun as possible, would that be okay? What do you think he said to that? You know, of course, people want to have more fun and more smiles on their faces whenever they can. And as adults, we just do not do quite enough of that. But context is going to be important. If, for example, my client was telling me about something that was deeply traumatic and they really needed to get something off of their chest, then at that point my role is to listen and not to, what's the word I'm looking for? The word I'm looking for is...
Mum's the word.
I guess not to be disrespectful by making their thing funny before that's what they're ready for. And this is why context is so incredibly important. For example, if you're a leader and a manager, there are probably a huge number of times where bringing humour into the workplace is not a good idea. But again, it's going to come down to context. If you have a great relationship with your staff, for example, then actually they may appreciate that. Sometimes it can stop you from being a bit less scary and maybe slightly more approachable if you are someone who has a good sense of humour, especially if you're somebody's boss. But if a member of staff comes to you because they are anxious about something, humour might not be appropriate at that particular point in time. Then again, you go, humour may be perfect for that particular moment in time because it might change their state and get them focused in a more positive way. So how do we tell the difference? Like, when do we know that the context is right? And that, my friends, is where the other important things come in. We have this all-important ingredient that is most definitely required, and that is rapport. You need to have really good rapport with the people that are around you. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you've known them for ages. That's not necessarily what rapport is about at all. You could have known someone forever and still have really bad rapport with them. Equally, you could have just met someone for 10 minutes and have great rapport with them. So it's going to come down to how well you click at that particular moment in time. And also bear in mind too that you could have had rapport with someone yesterday but then not today. Like, rapport is always shifting and evolving and changing. So the key thing then is, well, how do you know when you've got it versus when you haven't? There are actually 4 indicators of rapport. I'm sure I've mentioned them to you before, but I'm going to remind you all once again. The first indicator of rapport is that someone may experience a colour change when you are communicating with them. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they become pinker and more blushed, although it might. Equally, it might mean that they were blushed in the beginning and become paler, because we're not necessarily applying any particular meaning to their colour. We're just looking to see that their colour has changed in some ways. Most of the time, it's going to be that they go from pale to blush because they have a warmness towards you, and that warmness may manifest itself physically by making their cheeks a bit more rosy. The second thing is that we may have the ability to lead them. And what I mean by leading is that when we are initially building rapport with someone, we very often do it using our words, our tone, and our physiology, which would be the key one, and the easiest to spot and explain to you right now. So if I were building rapport with someone who is in front of me right now, and I noticed that as they were talking, they were leaning on their hand like this, then I would make the effort as I respond to them to also begin leaning on my hand like this. And that creates almost like a mirror image of their physical posture. And this creates a sense of rapport because we like people who are in some way like us, even if it's on an unconscious level, and unconsciously there's an awareness that their physiology is the same as ours. That can create that sense of connection and lead us to having greater rapport. So leading happens when I've made bags of effort to match and mirror somebody else's physical posture, and then I decide to change and sit in a way that I am most comfortable with, and notice that they then unconsciously mirror me and that they change their physical posture to match mine. So leading happens after we have first been pacing with them, copying what they do. And the same can happen with our tone of voice when we're speaking too. So we might notice that someone speaks quite fast and racy, and as they speak quite fast and racy, we reply quite fast and racy because we are matching with them. And then after a while we can kind of settle our voices down, become lower and slower, and notice that their tone mirrors yours and that they begin to slow down and become lower and slower. So you've just led them from where they were to somewhere else. That's what leading is all about. The next thing that we might notice, so our third indicator of rapport, is that they might say something that just outright tells you that they feel comfortable with you. In fact, they might just say, "I feel comfortable with you."
I feel very comfortable around you.
Equally, it could be that they say something a bit more logical, like their mind is trying to make sense of the reason why they feel so comfortable with you, even though they've perhaps only just met you. So they might, for example, say, "Have I met you somewhere before? Do I know you from a different life?" or something like that. And our fourth indicator of rapport, which is my favourite in terms of really tuning into when I've got rapport with someone, the most reliable, in my humble opinion, is you just feel it. You just feel like you are well connected with that person. You feel like you're comfortable. You know, you just feel like you get on. Everything's cool. Everything is fine and dandy. If you are in the right context for making humour and you have rapport, then proceed, my friends. But proceed even so with caution. So let's talk about the times when we might not want to use humour in order to break somebody's pattern that they're in at that particular time, to jolt them out of a highly emotional state. There are going to be times when, even though they are a crying, blubbering mess and the best thing you could do right now is make them laugh, there are still times when you shouldn't do it. So number one reason why we would not use humour is because we're just uncomfortable with what they're talking about. Now, I guess I'm appealing more so to our newer practitioners who perhaps have not quite got their teeth into what it's like to really sit back and listen to someone as they are sharing their stuff. And for those of you who are not practitioners and have absolutely no desire to be, but maybe you are in some sort of role in your work where you perhaps get people coming to you with their troubles sometimes it's tough to listen. You know, sometimes it's hard to listen to what people are saying, and we feel uncomfortable because their problem is clearly making them uncomfortable, and so we just want to move away from that discomfort. We want to help them move away from that discomfort, and so we just want to like crack the story with a one-liner that's going to instantly change the mood. But if someone needs you to hear them, if they in that moment just need to share their stuff and get something off of their chest, the best thing you can do is to sit back and listen and allow them to share what they need to share whilst you are fully present. They're not necessarily asking you for a solution. They're not necessarily asking you for comfort. They maybe just need someone to listen and to be there with them at that moment in time whilst they share their story. Now, when they get to the end of sharing their story and that tension has lifted from the atmosphere, then you can start thinking about bringing some humour gently into it, but go gently. Which takes me on to my next don't situation. The other time that we don't want to be using humour, no matter what context we are in, whether you are a therapist, a leader, a manager, or just a good friend, is when doing so is going to cause humiliation towards that person. You want to use humour in a way that is either jokey enough that it's still safe, or isn't in any way directed at that particular person, or really in any way that's going to degrade yourself either, because actually that's never really funny. That just makes people feel a little bit uncomfortable if you just like slander yourself in front of them. But what you can do is you can use humour in a way that lifts the mood and lifts them out of a bad emotional state. You just want to be sure that in doing so, you're not going to make them walk away from that interaction feeling like they should be embarrassed or that they were taken the mickey out of or humiliated in some way. So, now we've got like really serious about humour.
I was serious.
Shall we talk about when it is good to do? Because let's face it, it is good to do and we need to be doing much more of it. So in NLP, we have all of these different techniques that we use that the actual processes themselves between you and me are actually not really all that important. But don't go telling any serious NLPer that, for God's sake. The techniques themselves are really just a framework for us as practitioners to follow to help people get to better results in their life. But really, all any of those techniques do is create a reframe. So a reframe is when you have a situation, like a particular environment, or you have a particular problem, and you change one of them. You either take the problem and stick it in a new environment, or you keep the same environment and you put something else different in it, which suddenly makes the problem not seem a problem anymore. And that process of reframing what someone is experiencing is done through our techniques in NLP, but it's also, there is a fly.
Fly, fly, fly. Fly, fly, fly.
But it's also something that happens whenever you make a joke. So all jokes in themselves are reframes. A joke is when you think something is going in one direction and zip, it goes off in a completely random different direction. And it's almost like the surprise of how the story suddenly twisted is what makes it quite funny. You know, the surprise is part of it. It doesn't go where you thought it was going to go. So all jokes are reframes too. And if someone is having a particular difficulty, challenge, or upset, by reframing that, we might not just give them a different way of thinking, but we might also make them laugh. And have you ever had it in life where you've been in like a really negative state, maybe even something like anger? You ever had like really powerful anger and then somebody makes you laugh? It's like almost annoying at how swiftly and effectively it obliterates that anger so that you cannot be angry anymore. I'm sure I've mentioned this story on the podcast in the past, but I'm going to mention it again just one more time for those of you who haven't heard it historically. Once upon a time, I was in the middle of an argument with my then boyfriend, and I was simultaneously making a smoothie. We know where this goes, don't we?
I know where this is going.
And I chucked all of the fruit into the smoothie and I poured in some like milk or whatever liquid went into it. And we were still arguing and I wasn't concentrating properly. And I hit the blender button and everything went up in my face like this. And I took my glasses off and I just had like eye holes and the rest of me was covered in like pink fruit smoothie. And it was very, very funny. I was also incredibly annoyed because I was trying so hard to have an argument with somebody, but it just ruined my argument. And in that moment, it just made the argument not seem all that worthwhile anymore and not all that valid anymore. Laughter can really jolt us out of very negative states, and we can definitely use it to our advantage in people that we are interacting with who are maybe in one of those bad states. So we do want to use humour to break a bad pattern and to get someone thinking in a very different way. And there's loads of other good reasons for using humour too. You know, it's scientifically proven that people who laugh more tend to be healthier, tend to get better quicker from illness, tend to suffer with mental health issues far less. Humour is a really good way for us to keep ourselves healthy. And the other good thing is that it's contagious. You know, you've seen those videos do the rounds on Facebook where someone just starts laughing uncontrollably on the middle of a tube train, and then everyone else is laughing even though they've got no idea what that original person was laughing at. Laughter is so contagious, and it's such a beautiful, wonderful thing that we can do to change our emotional state super quickly. And you've all got memories from the past of something funny that's happened to you before that when you think about it, it still makes you chuckle to yourself even now. That memory is like gold dust. You want to be using that memory far more than you currently tap into it. If you're ever having a bit of a down day, like, hop onto YouTube, like, come to YouTube, come and have a look at some of the funny cat videos or the funny kid videos. Like, there's loads of stuff out there that can put a smile on your face every single day. And if you can do that for someone else too, if you can kind of lift somebody else, you could really set the course for them to have a better day than they might have done otherwise. And that's an incredibly powerful thing. And finally, I'm going to mention something which might sound a little abstract to all of you, but I think I've noticed something. I think I've noticed that the older we get, or certainly in adults, it's almost like we don't let ourselves laugh quite as much. Does that make any sense to you? Like, if you know what I'm talking about right now, please leave me a comment or send me an email or something. But I think I've noticed that we almost don't give ourselves permission to laugh.
You have my permission.
Because if we are laughing, then we're not being serious. And if we're not being serious, then what? People don't take us seriously. It means that we mustn't be doing our jobs properly. It means that we mustn't be taking care of things as well as we should be doing. What is it? Why is there this idea that as you get older you need to become more serious? Like, that's just ridiculous. Do you know how attractive it is to be around someone who is super funny and makes you laugh all the time? Like, it is one of the best things ever to have someone in your life who can always, like, guaranteed stick a smile on your face. And you know what it does for you to hear somebody else laughing as well. Like, you know how much joy that can bring for you. So why do we get this kind of stuffy exterior the older we get? I just don't get it. But I've also been there and I have done it. And I have made a conscious effort over the last few years to almost deliberately bring some brightness and lightness back into my life. Now, I've always enjoyed laughing and finding stuff funny, but I wouldn't always bring it in at every available opportunity, because sometimes it's like I was too focused on getting to where I needed to go to in that conversation or in that interaction to give adequate attention to what was going on in the moment and how I could utilize that to put a smile on somebody's face. And a few months back, I met someone who was just really good at kind of pacing an experience to some kind of an extreme with the use of intonation. So they would say something like, "What? How did you do that?" And just really become very animated. And it always made me laugh when they did it. And I started bringing it more and more into my sessions, not just the sessions that I do with children and young people, but the stuff that I do with adults as well. And do you know what? It hasn't stopped being funny yet. I mean, sometimes it's probably really, really annoying, but it's also funny. And it creates that sense of, this doesn't always have to be hard and heavy and serious. Because let's face it, right now in life, and I don't care at what point in time you're watching this video, this is still going to be relevant, or listening to this podcast, life right now is hard and heavy enough as it is. We don't need it to be any more stressful and serious than it is already. So if we've got an opportunity to lighten and brighten things and to put a bit of a smile on people's faces by adding a bit more animation into how we interact and a bit more energy into how we engage with people, then it sounds like that might be exhausting for you, but the truth is when people start smiling and laughing with you, it re-energizes you based on their reactions. You know, you can really almost create your own special life source from putting smiles on people's faces. And that is my challenge to you for throughout the next few weeks and maybe even up until into next month or whenever it is that I speak to you next. My challenge to you is as much as possible to put smiles on other people's faces and notice what that does for you. And then I would like you to report back by leaving me a comment in the comments section down below. Let me know what happened for you when you made somebody else smile, when you made somebody else laugh, when you allowed things to be funny. You know, if you've ever had a situation where, like, maybe someone that you work with or maybe your child did something that should have warranted a stern look, but you also know there's an opportunity to turn that into a smile. Notice what that does to that particular situation. You can't do that all the time, but you know what? Every now and again, it just rehumanizes you and makes you seem much more comfortable and approachable as a human being, and that might mean the world to someone in that particular moment. So if you have found something useful or important in what I have said to you today, then please go ahead and give this video a thumbs up. Give it 5 stars if you are listening on a podcasting platform such as iTunes, which if you don't, then you can tune in that way. And make sure that you subscribe to this channel if you are not already by clicking the red subscribe button. I will speak to you all in the next few weeks, probably next month if we're being real about it. And until then, keep smiling and look after yourselves. Bye for now.